There are so many different devices that can be used to extend the Wi-Fi signal in your home, so it's totally understandable if you get these devices confused. One particular device that can be used to extend the Wi-Fi signal in your home is a Wi-Fi access point, and that's what we'll be talking about today. So what is a Wi-Fi access point and how do they work? Well, as I mentioned, a Wi-Fi access point is another one of the available devices that can extend the Wi-Fi signal in your home. And it's used to ensure that your entire home has a strong Wi-Fi signal. The way that wireless access points work, as you'll see in a moment here, is they essentially serve as another router in your home in that they broadcast the same Wi-Fi network and password that your router is broadcasting. To illustrate this, let's take a look at a standard home network. Here you have your modem, which is used to provide your home with a connection to the internet. And then your router is connected to your modem, so that way it can broadcast a Wi-Fi signal to your home that your devices can connect to. But what about a circumstance where your router isn't providing sufficient Wi-Fi signal and you still have dead spots in your home? There are some devices that have a weak Wi-Fi signal. What you can do is you can implement a wireless access point. With the wireless access point, it is connected to your router with an Ethernet cable, and it broadcasts the same Wi-Fi network name and password as your router. This is different than other devices like a Wi-Fi extender, because a Wi-Fi extender, when it's rebroadcasting your Wi-Fi network, it will have a separate Wi-Fi network name and password for that Wi-Fi network. This makes things challenging with your devices because then you have to manually go and connect to those different Wi-Fi networks depending upon your location in your home and the strength of the Wi-Fi signal that you're getting either from your router or your extender. With a wireless access point, it makes it a lot easier for your devices because your devices will automatically connect to the device that's providing it with a stronger Wi-Fi signal. Whether it be your router or your wireless access point, it will basically determine which one of these devices is providing me with a stronger Wi-Fi signal, and it will automatically connect to it. One thing that's important to note here, however, is that although an access point is essentially serving as another router in your home, in the sense that it's broadcasting the same Wi-Fi network name and password as your primary router, it doesn't replace your primary router. You still need to have a router in your home network if you're going to be implementing an access point. Another benefit of Wi-Fi access points is you're not limited to just adding one to your home network. If you have a large square footage or maybe an office building that you're providing Wi-Fi access to, you can implement multiple Wi-Fi access points. There's no limit to the amount of access points you can add to your home network, but for most people, maybe 1 or 2 access points will be sufficient for providing their entire home with a Wi-Fi signal. So how exactly does a Wi-Fi access point work? Well, as I mentioned, it needs to connect to your router with an Ethernet cable. So what you will have is you'll have an Ethernet port on the back of your wireless access point. This connects to your router, and that's what allows it to broadcast the same Wi-Fi network name and password that your router is broadcasting. Another great benefit of wireless access points is the fact that you can power these devices using a technology called Power over Ethernet, or PoE. So as I mentioned, these devices need to be connected to your router with an Ethernet cable, but with Power over Ethernet, you can provide both data and power to these devices with that Ethernet cable. So these wireless access points, they come with power adapters, which connect to the back of the device and then to a power outlet. But in many cases, you want to implement these Wi-Fi access points in locations that are not near power outlets. That's what Power over Ethernet allows you to do, and I've made a series of videos detailing what PoE is, how it works, and how you implement it. So if you're looking to do that with your wireless access point, you might want to go check those videos out first, just so you can understand what's involved with PoE. So when should you use a Wi-Fi access point in your home network? Well, let's go through a few different examples here so you can see some cases where Wi-Fi access points are best used. This first example here, and it's one we alluded to earlier, if you live in a home with multiple levels or a lot of square footage, you might need to implement a Wi-Fi access point to cover any dead zones in your home. So let's say in this example, we have a router that's broadcasting its Wi-Fi signal. This Wi-Fi signal is the green shaded area, but as you can see here, the Wi-Fi signal does not cover the entire home and we have a dead zone as a result. What you can do is you can implement a Wi-Fi access point. As you can see here, our access point is connected to our router with an Ethernet cable, and then this access point is broadcasting its own Wi-Fi signal, the same Wi-Fi network name and password as your primary router. But what's happening here is this green shaded area is expanded because of the Wi-Fi signal that your access point is broadcasting. The other benefit about wireless access points is that you can implement them in locations that are far away from your primary router. There are some devices that extend your Wi-Fi signal, for example, Wi-Fi extenders, that need to be implemented within the Wi-Fi range of your primary router in order for them to work. Basically, what's happening is they're taking the existing Wi-Fi signal from your router and then rebroadcasting that Wi-Fi signal. Wireless access points don't operate this way, however, because they're connected to your router with an Ethernet cable. This basically gives them free range in where you put them and where they're located. So here in this example, we have our home and we have our primary Wi-Fi network that our router is broadcasting, but we have a garage or a barn that is separate from our primary home that we want to provide Wi-Fi access to. What we need to do is we need to implement a Wi-Fi access point. Again, you have an Ethernet cable connecting your router and your access point. Your access point provides a Wi-Fi signal to this barn or garage. And as you can see, the two Wi-Fi signals between your primary router and your access point are not overlapping each other. And that's because we're using this Ethernet cable to connect the two devices. The most difficult aspect of Wi-Fi access points is the fact that they need to be connected to your router with an Ethernet cable. But if you're able to do this and if you're able to implement access points in your home, you'll get significant performance benefits as a result. The reason for this is that Ethernet connections to the internet in general offer less delay and better internet speed than wireless connections. So basically what's happening here is with your wireless access point connected to your router with an Ethernet cable, you're maximizing that internet connection. There are some other devices that extend your Wi-Fi signal wirelessly, for example, with Wi-Fi extenders, but those devices, they have performance limitations because they're extending your Wi-Fi signal wirelessly. So if your home is either already wired for Ethernet cables in the wall, or you're able to connect your Wi-Fi access point and your router with an Ethernet cable, you should seriously consider connecting these devices or adding them to your home network if you need better Wi-Fi coverage. With that said, whether a Wi-Fi access point will be a good fit for your home network will depend upon your unique internet needs and your home's configuration. As I mentioned, there are other devices that will extend your Wi-Fi signal, and you might want to look at a few of these different devices to find out which one is the best fit for your home network. I'll make some follow-up videos comparing and contrasting Wi-Fi access points with other solutions, and hopefully this will provide you some clarity on what will be the best fit for your home network. I'd love to see in the comments section if you're currently implementing Wi-Fi access points or if you're using another device to extend your Wi-Fi signal. And as always, thanks for checking out this episode from Network from Home, and we'll catch you on the next one.